It's looking quite positive down the road when it comes to the future of the Star Wars franchise, given that we have, of course, creators like Jon and Dave gaining so many privileges over at Lucasfilm, all thanks to Chapek before in the past, and that's now being all handled as well by Bob Iger, really letting Jon and Dave do whatever they have to do to settle out the franchise and really bring it back to its roots and handle things by George Lucas. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the kind and great support. Now, one thing about George, Jon, and Dave is that as of right now, what they are currently trying to do and establish is by bringing in a lot of fan-favorite elements of Star Wars Legends, as well as, of course, taking a lot of the unapproved material from the 90s and the early 2000s and using that as new material. Now, we already know that Kathleen Kennedy has been going through a lot. She's been struggling with the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew to the point where the Disney board members had to intervene and really get Jon and Dave to fix a couple of scenes here and there to really kind of propel those stories to prevent them from being complete nightmares and just complete disasters when it comes to ratings. Now that brings us to exactly what recently happened between both Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy, and when it comes to a big project by Kathleen Kennedy that almost happened, that thankfully fell apart all thanks to Iger. So we're going to be tapping into all of this, all the specifics, all the details about this, and exactly what it entails. Now, for those of you that don't know, Kathleen Kennedy always wants to kind of just detach anything from George Lucas, to really just cut it down to the stump and have nothing to do with George and just move on. However, with that being said, with Disney CEO Bob Iger now making big adjustments behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, creators Favreau and Filoni are still busy with the AHSOKA series and Mando 4. However, it's noted recently Bob Iger made a significant adjustment at Lucasfilm by canceling a major plan by Kathleen Kennedy that has now come to a halt and got erased from the roadmap entirely. Now, this is part of the process of clearing way for projects to be greenlit by Jon and Dave. What Iger canceled was a big plan by Kathleen Kennedy to completely retcon the original trilogy Star Wars movies using a realistic animated Star Wars TV show that was going to literally rewrite the canon of the original trilogy. The series was going to focus on Luke, Han, and Leia, and the animation style was going to be similar to video game cutscenes. However, the story was going to completely undo everything that George had created and did for the Star Wars franchise. Now, let me just pause here quick for a second. So, we actually touched on this about a year ago, of how there was an animated series in the works, a realistic animated series, I must add, that was going to be not cartoony looking per se, that was going to undo all the events, or big events, within A New Hope, Empire, and Jedi. And the problem with that is that Kathleen Kennedy wanted to basically kind of create her own take on the original trilogy films, without having to necessarily reshoot them all. Basically, this was all going to be animated using motion capture tech, very high quality, very upscale technology. And they were actually trying to get Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford on board. We'll talk about that in a second. But basically what they were going to do is that they were going to actually change some of the highlights of the original trilogy movies, like big moments in episodes 4, 5, and 6, that was going to be considered the new canon under Disney. And this is something, by the way, that George Lucas was fighting against. He was really trying to prevent this from happening. Even when Chapek was on board, they were struggling to prevent this from even happening until now. Thankfully, this is not going to happen anymore. It's not going to move forward. It'll never see the light of day, ever. So Bob Iger made sure of that. He made sure of that by going up to the Disney board and settling things straight. However, when it comes to the specifics, this is where things begin to get quite worrisome, because it makes you realize what Kathleen Kennedy is all about and what may happen with Skeleton Crew and the Acolyte when it comes to retcons. So anyways, moving on. Now, one big plan by, of course, Kathleen Kennedy was that she was going to drastically change the ending a return of the Jedi between both Vader and Luke. What that entailed specifically is unclear. However, another big change was that she was going to eliminate Luke from rescuing Leia in A New Hope, and that Leia was set to rescue herself in the series. Bob Iger saw this as a big problem for Star Wars and immediately informed the board that all agreed to cancel the 15-episode project that was still in development. Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford were both approached by Kennedy to reprise their roles as voiceovers and using motion capture sequences. However, both Hamill and Ford declined to take part in the show. Now, to be very clear, it was supposed to be a 15-episode series, a half hour each. That was the overall endgame for Kathleen Kennedy, where 5 episodes for A New Hope, 5 for Empire, and 5 for Jedi, to retell all the events of the original trilogy movies, the highlights, so to speak. Honestly, this would have been a terrible, terrible thing, and I think you would have gotten a backlash even worse than the backlash that you got with The Last Jedi. So, I think that Bob Iger made the right call here by really just calling the shots early and getting rid of this off the pipeline. Now, obviously, they're cleaning up house over at Lucasfilm. They're cleaning up spots, opening up segments of the roadmap to be inserted for John and Dave's material. And this just opened up a big slot for 2025. Again, they want to begin to get 3 Star Wars shows out a year, more so than that, eventually by 2025, along with Star Wars films. Basically, what Disney wants is that they want the Marvel status. And I'm not quite sure if that's going to be good or bad, because many fans may feel that might be oversaturating things. I would like to hear your take on that, by the way. Would having too many shows and movies at once be oversaturated? If you want my 2 cents, if they're all quality made, and they're very engaging, where you just can't lay your eyes off those projects, bring it on. You know, that's when it's fine. But when it's lacking quality, and when people are rolling their eyes and getting tired, that's when you gotta really, take a step back and limit your installments. So anyways, this is a very interesting development, the fact that Iger came in and prevented all of this from happening. Again, Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill declined to come back. That tells you a lot about how bad this would have been. They wanted no part in this, not even Harrison Ford, who, by the way, doesn't really care all that much about Star Wars. You know, he himself even said that. He's more engaged with his Indiana Jones history. But regardless, this would have been probably the nail in the coffin to the Star Wars franchise. And Iger saw it, Chapek saw it, the board saw it, and they just used common sense and prevented this from happening. So I think that we all have to give at least a little bit of, a bit of applause to that, because this would have single-handedly destroyed the franchise through and through. So anyways, guys, drop a comment below. Fill me in on what you think about all of this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
From night to morning.